All right, we're on.
Well, good morning, and good morning to Justice Earl and Attorney General Josh Stein, and welcome to the first meeting of the working group number 4. And I don't have the title right in front of me, but I know this is the working group, and Mercedes helped me out, that we're committed to looking at trials and post-conviction proceedings and how we can advance racial equity in those specific aspects of criminal justice. And this morning is going to be an especially important morning because we're going to try to sort out our own way of going forth and carrying forward that mission. And we've got a lot of great people around the table who are going to help us with that difficult task. But first, we're glad, and we're not sure how long we're going to have our 2 co-chairs with us. But let's introduce and have them give us a charge for this morning's activities. General Stein, Justice Earl, please take it away.
Well, welcome to you all for your first work group meeting. Really appreciate all the contributions each of you made to the collective task force effort. And now you get to really dig deep, go down, chew on a lot of really hard and important issues. And I expect what will happen in the process of doing this work is you'll find some issues are pretty general consensus, real quick to adopt, and you can make those recommendations to the full task force. In many ways, like what we did in our second meeting as task force, where we adopted 3 recommendations that we all had consensus on. I expect there'll be other more complex, potentially more controversial issues where you're really going to want to spend a lot of time deliberating. You're going to want to get input from outside experts, and those issues may take longer. And be comfortable with that. We're not expecting you all to solve all of the problems with our trials and post-conviction criminal justice system in 2 meetings. So just be committed to working hard and diligently, and I think that you will see results. I'm confident that we will. Henderson joked he wasn't sure how long we would be on. I would stay for the whole meeting, but we have a council state meeting at 9 a.m. So I'm going to have to peel off before that happens. But otherwise, we wish you Godspeed. Thank you, Henderson.
Thank you. Justice Earl?
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I just want to make 2 quick points. First, I hope you all know and feel probably from our public hearing, but just know there is immense interest among many sectors in North Carolina of the work that you're doing. I can say without hesitation that every group that's invited me to speak since this task force was appointed, the only thing they want to know about is the task force going to address this issue, and when are they going to do this? And so there truly is great interest out there and great appreciation for the work that you're doing. I think the second point I would make is that we don't underestimate the challenge. And I think particularly because to keep in mind that we are making recommendations initially, but then we have the bulk of our work in following up on those and fostering their implementation, monitoring their implementation, and that is no easy thing. Many task force end up writing reports that get put on a shelf, but I continue to believe that when we keep in our mind that we are truly about structural changes that will end the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system, that if we keep our focus on that, we can achieve that. I am here, Josh and I are here really to be a resource to you. You are the voting members of this working group. We are just here to answer questions or advise or chime in when we might have something helpful to say. I'm going to stay on through the whole meeting, but I'm really going to sit back. This is your work group, and I'm excited to see the work that you'll be doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Justice Earl. I think just to echo one of the comments of the co-chairs is the public comment session was especially informative and inspiring. Actually, I thought that many of the concerns that the citizens were able to raise dovetailed nicely into what we thought were the concerns of the pursuit of racial equity and criminal justice, but to have it come through the voices of people who were suffering from the communities that were directly affected by the disparities in the criminal justice system was especially impactful. And I think it sort of gives a special charge to what we are called to do in this working group. I know that as we go through the agenda, part of what we're going to be deciding is how we apportion our own time and resources to reviewing and processing these tasks. And we're going to get to this during the course of the agenda, but we have such good support, staff support amongst us. And I've been grateful just over the last weekend to review some of the materials that are pointed to in the agenda. And it's comforting to know that we've got Mercedes and Jasmine available, Ellen, to help us work through those documents and to make these meetings as productive as we can. When our co-chairs talk about the range of issues that the governor is concerned about and that North Carolinians are concerned about, it was daunting for me to spend a few minutes, well, more than a few minutes, to sort of sketch out some of the priorities I hope that we're going to be able to reach in the subcommittee and to talk about when we get to that portion of the agenda. And one of the early things that we're going to decide is, how we use our time. I think we've got a task force meeting on the 18th. What do we as a working group do between now and the 18th to make that task force meeting as productive as we can make it? And I think not only having the staff support that we have, but having the facilitators from NCCJ available to help us think through how we work together as a group is going to be extremely effective. So Karen and Michael, I'm especially looking forward to those parts of the agenda where you help rein us in and help develop processes that we can all feel fairly give everyone an opportunity to participate, have their ideas vetted and heard by others, and hopefully put us in the best position to make recommendations to the governor. I'm sure that cutting off this welcome part is important, and getting to the agenda is even more important. So I'm going to close my piece of this welcome now and move as quickly as we can to the portion of the agenda that helps us identify ourselves, who we are, and how we're going to establish norms of conducting the business of the working group. And for this part of the agenda, let's turn it to Michael.
Yes, thank you so much, Henderson. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning, being part of this great work. As Henderson said, our role is to help make sure that everyone feels that they can share openly and honestly, and that their recommendations, whatever the suggestions they have, are honored, and that they get space, and that. I appreciate you, Henderson, saying in the beginning that we are working for the people, and I think it's important for us to recognize that while we have expertise, that we're people too, and that ideas are going to be impacting us as well. And so, as we think about that, we want to start off by having you all introduce yourselves, folks that are the members of the working group, and think about and share a couple of things that you feel you need to ensure that you can feel comfortable sharing and offering your perspectives and recommendations in our time together here and in the other working sessions. Once we do that, we'll talk a little bit about some things that we at NCCJ also feel are important to keep in mind if those things aren't broached. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start with calling a name so that we can get through this as quickly as possible, and just share some ideas for what you feel like you need from everybody in order for you to feel like, you can share openly and honestly, and to make sure your recommendations are honored. So I'll start with Ms. Brooke Locklear Clark, if you will. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brooke Clark. I'm a district court judge in Robeson County, which is Judicial District 16B. I hear a lot of criminal cases, traffic cases. I'm really excited about being part of this group. Being a judge is amazing, and I feel like I have the ability to impact folks who I see in court, those who come before me. But it also is, it limits me somewhat in what I can do and say beyond the courtroom. So I'm very excited about being part of this group. In terms of feeling comfortable sharing, I do. I'm not sure that there's really anything at this time that needs to occur for me to feel comfortable or feel like I can share my opinions or thoughts. I think they would be received well. And I don't have concerns at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike Hawkins.
Well, hi, and I would say good morning as well, and begin by saying how honored I feel to be on this group, to be with this group of people. And I have no problem sharing. And one thing I'll share right now is clearly I am the least qualified person on this phone call right now. I am not, my profession is not in law enforcement or in the judicial system. I'm a small business owner. I am a local elected official though, so I do hear things. I do have a sense for things that are important to the people in my local community. And certainly this is something, even in a small rural community way up in the mountains, this issue resonates with people here. So I look forward to working with folks and learning as I go, and hopefully being able to contribute in a meaningful way.
Thank you very much. Mary Pollard.
Hey, good morning. Yes, so I'm Mary Pollard. I am the Executive Director of the State Office of Indigent Defense Services as of yesterday. Before that, I was at Prisoner Legal Services for 10 years. Excited to get started on this working group. I don't have any particular concerns about my ability to share my opinions. I'm not generally shy about those things. I hate that we're in this pandemic and that we're not sitting around a table where I find it's much easier to do give and take or raise your hand and be recognized. So I know that's a real practical concern, but that's kind of where I am this morning. So I'm excited to get started. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that you all feel that you don't have any reservations about sharing your opinions. That's great. One of the things that we like to think about as we move forward is how important it is for us to listen to one another and receive without judgment. One of the things we like to say is to lean into judgment with curiosity. So I encourage folks to ask questions, listen with empathy, and I think that starting with our Chair Henderson. I would like for you to also, as we go into thinking about what the meeting goals are, what are some of the things that you feel are important for us to keep in mind as we share and move the meeting forward. You're muted, brother.
I'm going to learn. It's going to take a while. Let me say first that I've been a long time advocate as a public defender, as a civil rights lawyer, as a death penalty lawyer. I think for the last 25 years, I think I've honed different skills as a community activist and leader, skills in terms of collaborating and listening. And I think when we take on the challenge of this working group and the task force, I think it's those skills, Michael, that you're talking about: listening, hearing what each of us have to say, and making sure that we try to process what each of us has to say in terms of where we come out on the issues. With respect to the issues themselves, this is sort of the moment I've been waiting for 40 years of professional life, 39 years of professional life, and the opportunity to sit with people about the challenge of racial disparities in the criminal justice system, literally, has been sort of my life's ambition. So, part of the challenge for me is given that many of these thoughts, whether it's the death penalty or extreme sentences or fairness in trial, making sure that we have the ability both to bring learning and experiences from other parts of the state and other parts of the country to this task force and to this working group, so we have an opportunity to process it and to consider it. When Attorney General Stein noted that there might be some things that we could do quickly, like the task force has already done, that immediately registered with me that there's a proposal I'd like to submit about a jury selection process, and how this might be a proposal that we recommend that the Supreme Court take under expedited consideration. It's been reviewed by a sister state, Washington, very credibly, with a tremendous amount of academic study and support. And it's to deal with an issue that we have been struggling with in North Carolina for decades, for 40 years, in fact. So I do think, Attorney General Stein, that there will likely be some things that we can handle on an expedited matter. On the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, there are issues that are going to we're going to have to chew on and consider at some length. And in that basket, I would include what we do with the death penalty and the grievous racial disparities that grow out of that. A very related issue is extreme sentences. I've been looking at data from our own Department of Corrections, and to see the disparities of folks of color who are serving sentences of 60 years or more, life sentences. It's a shame. It's a source of shame to look at those numbers and see citizens, prisoners who are over 55 with life sentences ahead after having served decades in prison. Are there ways that we can look back and do something and make sure that that we're truly serving the ends of justice? So I do see that there's a range of issues that will take much time and vetting. And one of the challenges is how we organize ourselves as a committee between now and our next task force meeting. How do we as a working group decide to meet informally or back in formal sessions? So there are those topics, those issues of internal concern that we've got to manage. Part of what I'd like to do pretty quickly, though, is to give us an opportunity to put on the plate the issues that we think are sort of concern ourselves for the long term. And so, and to make sure that we get the members of the working group talking and expressing themselves about the interests that they would like to put on the table. So again, I think for this section, I go back to Michael and to Karen and help us lead through that conversation.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that you began. Michael, do you want to say anything more about the norms?
No. I think we got them all covered. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate that.
Right. And Henderson, thank you for teeing that up. Good morning, Karen Dyer with NCCJ. Wanted to, as you see on the agenda, talk a little bit about, so what are some of the things that you really, really want to make sure that you individually, as a part of this working group, that gets addressed? And so, Henderson, you began, talking about, one thing that you would really love is the whole idea of the jury selection process, as well as some of other things. And so I'm going to ask task group members, I know you've been asked this question before. So what's important to you? What are you passionate about? What drives you to be a member of this committee? But right now, I want you to put those forward again so that people in this working group really can hear that these are the things that you're most interested. So it says here 1 to 3 things. I just would say, what are the things that you're very, very passionate about and you want to make sure that this group addresses. So I'll stop for a moment and say, as the spirit moves you, and I'm going to tell you you need to get your spirit moving. And anybody that wants to start, please do.
I can start. Again, this is Brooke Clark. I'm interested in some of the basic things that I see every day in district court, or almost every day, and then some kind of more general things too. Like, for example, we mentioned it, but judicial discretion. I would like to have a discussion about that. If a defendant comes before me and they could walk away without paying anything, unsupervised probation, or they could go to prison. That's a lot of area in between. And although I do enjoy it at times, having the authority to make that decisions, and I'm sure my colleagues do as well, I think it's something we need to discuss. The other thing is, we talked about fines and cost already. When a defendant comes before me and they've received the maximum punishment, so they've been in jail and maxed out their time, and a fine is still imposed with a due date, I'm not sure the statute precludes that, and it's problematic for me. Someone who's getting out of jail after spending 60 days in jail, they fail to show up for non-compliance court when they've not paid their monies, their cost and fines, usually just cost, and then they're arrested and they stay in jail for another month before we have a session of court. So not only have they maxed out their time, but now they're spending additional time in jail for not paying monies. So they're being punished about 2 or 3 times instead of 1. So it's kind of, again, I want to talk about those basic things and then more general, broad topics too. It's kind of a wide range. But...
All right, then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is Mike. I'll jump in and piggyback on what Brooke just said, and maybe elaborate or again, as a layperson, I might be expanding this in ways that we don't need to expand it. But I think that when I think about this, it ties into the whole concept of what are we trying to accomplish with the incarceration system? Are we trying to rehabilitate people? Are we trying to punish people? And Henderson's comment earlier about the disparity in the length of sentences, and I think that ties into just a philosophical thing. And I would hope that we're trying to rehabilitate people rather than just trying to punish people. But do we have those kinds of, again, I don't know, do we have those kinds of conversations? Are those kinds of conversations that we need to be having? Because I think it drives a lot of these questions about links and about the fee structure. I have a friend up here who's a Superior Court judge, and I've talked to him at length about this committee, and that's his big thing, is the fee structure can be really onerous to people who are least able to pay. And how do you try and fix those issues?
Thanks, Mike. You're right.
Am I okay? I unmuted. Good morning. So you asked kind of, what drove us to be here, and I've said it before, but I'll just say for this morning that I was at North Carolina Prisoner Legal Services for 10 years as the executive director, and we looked at hundreds and hundreds of cases. I worked on dozens personally, and I come away from that experience with just this overwhelming sense that there are extreme racial disparities in how people are sentenced, and I, that's based on my review of cases, case by case by case. And one thing that excites me about the possibilities of this task force is that we have a really robust data team, and I think it would be I'm not a data person or a math person, but if there's some ability to kind of delve into how we've been sentencing people and how we've been incarcerating people and how people are exercising that judicial discretion and prosecutorial discretion, I think it would be good if there are racial disparities, it would be good to be able to prove them beyond what I believe, anecdotally. And I think that would help drive policy. So that's one thing I'm hopeful for the task force. I have seen so many just wildly disparate sentences for essentially the same behavior. I wish there was some way we could go back and address some of those with a more robust post-conviction or parole system. I want to say up front, I'm not a prison abolitionist, right? I believe that people sometimes need to be incarcerated for the reasons of public safety, and that if we're doing that, we need to be humane about it. We need to work to help them be released safely someday, right? So that's my worldview. One other thing I've given a lot of thought to, kind of unrelated to this, but related to what Henderson started with, is the fact that our juries don't reflect our community. And I think if our charge is criminal trials, looking at why that is really important. I think we need to look at how we select the veneer. I think we need to look at whether we need to have such a thing as a peremptory challenge. I know we've had Batson now for 30 something years, but it's just now starting to get a little traction in the courts in North Carolina. But most significantly, I think, is the fact that a lot of people just simply can't afford to sit on a jury. So all these things can be fixed, but whether we have the resources to fix them, can we pay people more than $12 a day to sit on a jury? I don't know. And whether we have the will to fix them, I guess, is a separate question. So I've a bit, but I've said my piece for morning. Thank you.
All righty then. Well, thank you. Thank you for all. Have any of our other task force members joined? No? All righty then. Well, I'm going to ask to turn it over right now.
If I can interrupt, I'm not sure that I used my moments during this session to talk about the ideas I really want to put on the idea bank. And, just sort of listening to the other members, all of what they said is what I want to do too. So I think the fee and fine question is a huge question. I think we need to look at what purpose those things serve in our system, and whether that's the way we need to fund our courts. I think our courts, our public defenders, our prosecutors are underfunded. And a question is, if we're going to accomplish racial equity in a way that protects public safety, court resources need to be increased. And what Mike talks about in terms of what the goal of the justice system, is it pure punishment? Is the prison the best place to accomplish rehabilitation? Are there other community assets that can be brought into that? That's extremely good. I think with respect to Mary's concerns about jury selection and Batson, we've got a model out of the state of Washington what can be done to make the system fairer, even short of ending peremptory challenges. I think the Second Look Act is something that can be used to address extreme sentences in a way that protects public safety, that brings the question back to the county level, to the court, and to the prosecutor to participate in the review of whether a sentence imposed decades ago remains the best outcome for the community as well as the affected family. And of course, I think that the death penalty, which has been the subject of review in state after state over the last 10, 15 years, and in fact, 10 states have walked away from it. We've now spent much more than a decade in North Carolina taking a serious look at the death penalty. And when the Supreme Court decided in 2015 by a vote of 5 justices only that they would not review the constitutionality of the death penalty, for a lot of people, the 4 justices who wanted that question called, who reviewed the problems with the death penalty, had the better of the argument. Well, now I think it's plain that North Carolina should examine that question as a state. How we can form recommendations that advance that in the working group and the task force, I think that's a matter for us to deliberate and to consider. But there's no shortage of important issues that we ought to task this talented research and data support system that we've got in the workforce. so that we can lift up the best recommendations possible to the task force. Thank you, Karen. Just wanted to squeeze in those additional thoughts.
Thank you. And thank you for helping to bring those together and summarize those. So I'm going to turn it over to Ellen right now. Ellen, so we're going to get into this. So let's talk about the SharePoint page in terms of the resources that we have, and then we'll start that work.
Great. I'm going to share my screen and just briefly go over with you all a SharePoint. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with SharePoint. We use it a lot over here. I find it to be very helpful. We've put this together for all task force members. You are looking right now at the home screen. There are 3 different folders of documents on that front page. Living documents includes the schedule and other documents we will inevitably put in there that are to be living and can be edited. You can also see over here, we have a calendar. This has all working groups meetings, all full task force meetings, and all data team meetings listed within it. You can click on other working group calendar invites there to access their Zoom meetings and attend as an attendee. The main thing I want to show you is this working groups page over here on the left-hand side. So if you click on that, you can see that each working group has a folder specifically for it. Out here, this is the document where the data team is going to access all the questions that you and other working groups come up with or requests for data, so they have one place to work out of. This is also the overview document for all working groups. You can see, who's on each one, their contact information, things like that. This is your specific folder. There'll be resources here. There are a few in here. Yeah, some helpful ones that speak to the issues you have been assigned. Back out here, there will always be the agendas will be located in this folder. They'll be emailed out ahead of every meeting, but should you want to review them again, they'll be here. Same with the meeting minutes that will get put up and of course sent out after each meeting, but I think it will be very helpful to make sure we have everything all in one place. And then your idea bank, which I believe Mercedes will be going over next. The SharePoint, I sent everyone a link to it, so you all should have access. If you have any issues at all, please contact me. I know that this can be kind of a technological hurdle, but I really think that this will help us all stay organized, and I am available at any time to sort of give you a personal tutorial so you can make sure you have appropriate access. Thank you all.
Ellen, I have a question. I was looking the other day. Where would I find the video from the open forum or the town hall?
Yes, so all of these meetings, including the public comment meetings, are live streamed to and then saved on the Attorney General's YouTube page.
Okay.
So they will always be there. Greg Saban is putting them in a similar playlist so that you can just click on one place and then see all of the videos associated with the task force,
right,
including this one, which is live streaming right now.
All right, thank you. So thanks. And Mercedes, want to talk to us about
Karen, if I can just interrupt for a moment and speak directly to Ellen. I think it was helpful to look at that SharePoint. I've got to confess that as helpful as that is, it challenges me just to think that I would participate and add to that structure. So do I hear you to be volunteering that we could communicate to you, email to you, and that you could put whatever contributions and information we have into that very useful and productive looking structure?
Yes, you actually have a variety of options of people to contact. I am available always. Mercedes can also help you, and your you now have a staff administrative lead, Malia Benson, who I believe is on the Zoom right now, who is also going to be available to manage that site. We are all here for you guys to make sure that this part of the process is as easy and painless as possible. So if there are things you cannot update in the document or you feel uncomfortable doing so, you can always email us directly and we will go ahead and make those changes in the documents so that there's no confusion and no deleting of things and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, that's good. All right, Mercedes.
Right, so just to introduce myself, I'm Mercedes Restuccia Clem. I'm an Assistant Attorney General. I do outreach and policy work with the Public Protection Section of the Department of Justice. And I want to introduce our intern, Malia, as well, who's, Olin mentioned, is going to be working as our administrative lead. I will be working as the substantive staff lead. And Henderson, to mention earlier, our title technically is Addressing Racial Equity in Trials and Post-Convictions, and that is a lot. And so we have tried to gather all of that as much as we could, but not all of it, in this idea bank. And I just want to start by saying that there are going to be additions to it. And please, Henderson, everybody, send them to me, send them to Ellen, Malia, whoever you're in communication with. We're here to take them in and process them all and send them out to the rest of the group as appropriate. So I think it's best maybe if I share my screen to go over this issue bank or this idea bank. And so I'm going to do that right here. Share. And there we go. So this is on the SharePoint. Ellen just showed us how to get there. And it's organized in such a way that there is basically a table of contents. And so you'll see the first page is just a little bit of a description. And then the overview is each issue that we have, or each topic that we have ideas for. And so the first being criminal trials, the second, use and impact of fines and fees, a third being prison discipline, a fourth being reinstating parole, redress for long-term sentences, and the second look at. And then the fifth, I didn't lose count, is the death penalty and sentencing disparities. And so we have an overview, which basically, again, goes into very specific ideas for each of those topic themes, if you will. Then we also have research resources. So there's the overview and then the research resources. I'll keep on scrolling down. So you'll see here, let's look at just, for example, criminal trials. For criminal trials, we have about 8 ideas so far. The first of which is study commission to gather data on disparities in pretrial conditions, charging decisions, and pleas and sentencing. And so on this, I can scroll down even more to the research resources. Here's our first one, as we mentioned, study commission to gather data on disparities. And then this goes into a lot more of a detailed description of the policy idea, right here. Some research resources, which are different organizations, the Sentencing Project, or universities that have looked into the issue. And then some examples on where it's in practice, where there's a pilot project, or proposals in place. And so here's some examples for that. And so we have those for a lot of ideas. So 8 ideas for criminal trials. We have 11 ideas for under the use of impact of fines and fees. 5 for prison discipline. 2, I think we've added this year to enacting the second look at, as we've been talking about, studying the death penalty and reinstatement of the Racial Justice Act. There's just a lot of ideas here, and I'm more than happy to, obviously, we're going to add more as we go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and open it up to, I guess, the group. If you have any questions, if you want to talk this out, I'd also kind of turn it over to Karen. You can help facilitate that part as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Mercedes. And as you said, the task is quite large, right? Lots of things that can be considered and covered, and it's heartening to see how what everyone has shared, I think, falls in line with what the task force and the executive order has already sort of outlined as focus areas for this working group. And so as we think about how we do our work and the process we take, I think it's important for us to start with, where do we start? You know, and I want to open it up for all the working group members to share openly for the next, you know, 20, 30 minutes around, if we're thinking about what takes priority in addressing racial disparities in this area. There's a lot of things that we could do up front, a lot of things that we can do first. And I know that everyone has passions and things like that, but the focus, as Attorney Anita Earls said at the beginning, is to focus on addressing racial disparities. From your expertise, from your perspective, from the things that you heard in the public comments, things that you hear in your own neighborhoods, around your own kitchen tables, right? What are some things that you think are the top priorities for this group to focus on first? So let's just start there in the way of addressing racial disparities.
Michael, one of the things that came loud and clear at the public comment was that people are dying today and are at risk of dying tomorrow as a result of the pandemic in our prisons. And what we know is the prisons are populated in a racially disparate manner, which means more Black and folks of color will be dying disproportionately as a result of the pandemic. You know, there are serious questions about whether all of those people in outbreak centers need to be there during this period of time. And a question is whether a study commission is the appropriate vehicle for deciding this kind of question, and whether or not this working group has something to say or to recommend to people about how we address that issue. And just one other comment about the Idea Bank. Study commission seemed to be a go-to resolution. And I think I would issue a caution that on some of these issues, much study, academic, governmental, and professional association have committed some of these ideas to study. And we have a tremendous wealth of information on these ideas. And so when we think about what our goal is as the task force, we might have the capacity to make recommendations that are more active than committing it to another group for review. So I would just sort of throw that out as an initial reaction and charge to us as we think about what ideas we want to commit to the group.
And Henderson, I want to take the opportunity to jump in real quick because I failed to share the crucial part of this issue bank. And I'm going to share my screen one more time. And this is basically implementation options. This is a grid that we have at the very end of our of this issue bank that talks about various ways, and this is not exclusive, right, of proposing changes. You know, there's legislative change, there's administrative changes, which you know, commission or other type of rule change, local agency level policy changes, and you know, things that require federal funding, if it's a training issue. So just to speak to your point, I did want to make sure I brought that up, that you know, a study commission is not the only way to obviously, you know, affect this, and hopefully we'll be able to use this in a meaningful way and make some, you know, good recommendations to the task force quickly.
Thank you for that, Mercedes.
My apologies for not sharing that earlier. I will stop sharing my screen.
So Henderson and everybody, I think Mercedes' screen kind of ties into what I was going to say, which is that it all seems urgent, right? It's all urgent. So do we want to look at things that we can get accomplished easily and prioritize those up front, and then work a little bit more slowly on the things that are going to require legislative action? There are some issues in our charge, excuse me, For example, prison discipline, that could be handled immediately at an agency level with some policy changes. There are other things that would require the General Assembly to act. So that's just food for thought. And I also wanted to just to piggyback on what Henderson said. There's an article in, I think it's the June 15th issue of the New Yorker magazine by the historian Jill Lepore, and titled "Why Government Commissions Fail." And I think we should all read it just as a historical lesson and something to think about. So.
And so Mary, just to follow up on the article, that has been added to our SharePoint site, although someone more technically skilled than me will have to tell you exactly where to find it, but I know I made the request that that be uploaded to our site so that it's available to everyone.
I will send a direct link around so everyone has it.
Thanks.
So Henderson started us off by saying that we have the sort of immediate charge of how do we address the racial disparities in the prison population that are being impacted by COVID-19, right? We have Mary mentioning prison discipline, right? So some things that we may be able to move quickly on, or some other things that folks would like to think about as prioritizing as we move forward into this continuing this for the next working group.
I had a general comment that, this working group seems to be dominated by lawyers, and it's appropriate that lawyers have things to say. But especially addressing to Mike's initial comments, much of what we've got to talk about is policy related. And much of the court's consideration of some of these big questions, the legal precedents and the technical legal piece is a lot less important than what some of the courts have said about the policy questions. So I think when we commit things to our data and our research assets, it's those policy questions that will sort of rise in terms of importance. So I think we ought to be especially vigilant about tasking our staff support and our research folks to answer the questions that you and our citizens have about why this system is not working the way we think it should, why it's not achieving the goals of justice we think it should, why racial equity has not been the organizing principle for our justice system from as long as that justice system has been around. These are policy questions. And so while legal cases and precedents has some importance and values, the real thing we're struggling with is whether this justice system meets the goals that the citizens of North Carolina have for our justice system. And what the data is going to show, it hasn't been meeting those goals. What can we do to put it on the right track? And it's going to require transformative change that citizens and community leaders need to take the leading role in accomplishing.
And this is Mike, and that just illustrates it's a really ambitious scope of what this particular working group is looking at and kind of tasking ourselves with. And the challenges, as we're talking about right now, is how do you even start? And I think you start at the very basics, the very beginnings, and you start with the 6 things in the final configuration that this group's been tasked to look at, and the 6 areas, assuming those are the ones that we're going to look at, and then take these things that have been suggested and put them in. You begin by putting them into a particular area, like prison discipline. There's a prison discipline area that we're looking at, and then start trying to, I like the idea of trying to find, for lack of a better word, the low-hanging fruit, things that everyone can agree on and can get moving on. And that might be the easiest way to begin, is to identify what are things that everyone can agree on, that no reasonable person would disagree, and there's evidence to support taking action in a certain way on things.
I like that.
So in that vein, what are the what do you all feel are the things that, if we're looking at the six recommendations, criminal trials, use and impact of fines and fees, death penalty, sentencing disparities, reinstating parole, redress for long-term sentences, prison discipline, collateral consequences of conviction. You know, I really appreciate Henderson, you kind of putting up at the front the immediate impact that COVID-19 is having on the prison population, and how does that impact some of these other things that we're seeing, right? Because it exacerbates the issue of release, right? Things like this, right? So in that scheme, so if we're thinking about, okay, what are the things that are taking priority? If that's one of the things to say, what do we need to gather or gain right now? Do we need to hear from folks? Do we need more research? Do people need time to go into the idea bank to gather some of their own data to be able to be more informed to move forward? How do we go from, you know, we have things that we've been asked to focus on. What do we feel we need to move forward to saying this is the first thing that we can, because at the end, you know, at the end of the month, that we're expected to be bringing some recommendations to the larger task force. So I think the public is hungry and eager to as Justice Earls mentioned in the beginning of this, they're eager to know what we're doing, you know. And so how do we move to action in this form?
I was thinking, walking backwards, we have a task force meeting on the 18th.
Mm-hmm.
And the question for me, do I have that wrong?
Yes, it's the 28th, August 28th.
Oh, let's get corrected quickly.
Our next working group meeting, I think, is the 18th.
On the 18th, yeah.
So our work, our executive.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I was wondering, those were bunched up together. So the next task force meeting is not till the 28th.
Yes, sir.
Well, that gives us a little bit more breathing room.
It sounds like one more work group meeting before the task force meeting.
Okay. So I guess then the question, I'm sorry. Well,
I was gonna say, but also if we wanted to have more meetings, we're open to do that. It's just a matter of finding the time and being able to give enough notice, and we should be able to do that. So if you all feel the need to have more meetings, by all means, we can do that.
Well, the question I had is whether or not we could have, you know, sort of productive, almost offline exchange of information through emails, so that, you know, if we were to have another meeting, we would sort of have a better sense of what each of us are thinking, what each of us thinks are items, like Mike says, low-hanging fruit that we could move pretty quickly through, and then think of how we might sort of stage some of the issues that are of longer term. And I see that Judge Thornburg may be joining us in just a few minutes. And we'll just ask him to, Judge Thornburg, are you with us now?
You're muted.
You're muted, Judge.
I'm with you, and I apologize. It was a crazy day yesterday, and I missed the invitation. So there you have it.
Okay. Well, I think we've had a very productive morning so far. Part of what we're sort of thinking about is how we respond best to our schedule. And we've got a scheduled meeting of the task force on the 28th. we've had some initial conversation about ideas that are important to the group, including fines and fees. That discussion that was part of the task force conversation. We've made notes about interests of response to COVID-19, to extreme sentences. Help me out, others. I know that I had a asterisk on the death penalty as a meaty subject that certainly would not be a good fit for quick decision. I know I wanted to actually wait until you were available to talk about modification of the MAR statute and 1420E with respect to consent MARs. There are a range of ideas that we might want to talk about informally and get a feel for what we think is doable in the short term. There's a Batson fix that the Supreme Court of Washington has implemented that is attractive across the country. Is that a fix that we could move on and recommend pretty immediately? So I think we're probably at that stage where we're trying to figure out as a group, how do we take next steps? How do we organize ourselves to advance some of the discussions that we've had this morning? Are there other members that would like to sort of clarify or state differently, our morning's discussion?
It's like you take care of. That's a lot.
A lot to take care of.
Yeah.
And I noted at the beginning that I was interested in some of the other working groups and wanted to monitor their activities, and reality is set in. I think this working group will have more than enough on our plate, and we'll trust our other task force members to look at and suss out the issues that are in front of them. But I really do think Mercedes and Jasmine, if you can help us out on how we might effectively use the research assets that are not around the table now. What's our ability to task some of those assets to respond to some of the questions that our working group might have?
I think pretty broad. We, as you know, we already have the data team. So to the extent there are data questions we have a process for getting those questions to the data team. As you identified, there are a lot of assets within the task force membership and people who have become adjacent to the task force effort. As someone was saying earlier, people are very interested in this work. I think that is true for practitioners and researchers as well. And we have had numerous folks reach out to us wanting to help. And so I think bring all of the questions that you have and add whatever you'd like to add to the idea bank. And we will do the work to run down what it is that you need to know, if only it's not knowable, which is, also something that we could anticipate happening at some point as well.
Well, let me suggest that I think that another meeting of the working group before the 18th would be helpful. And I would float the idea whether or not we should just go ahead and schedule another meeting of this group, a week from today.
I can do that. An 8 a.m. meeting is usually pretty doable.
Works for me.
Yeah.
And are you utilizing the Sentencing Commission also? That I know they have the Superior Court Judges Racial Equity Group is having them do some additional digging, and I think you and I can talk about that. But they're trying to compare apples to apples, and they're doing some new data crunching that we have not had done before that would be relevant to this group.
Absolutely. The Sentencing Commission is on the data team. They also are one of the groups that the executive order said the task force should collaborate with. So I think there's a natural sort of path there. Justice Earls, I think you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I was trying to jump in. First on that last point, and this is maybe just a structural question, but if the person who is the liaison to the Sentencing Commission is not on this work group, how do we facilitate them letting us know, what stage they're at in their data collection and how we can get access to it. So I have that question, but more fundamentally, just a nuts and bolts process question. I think through the comment, I've been taking notes, the comments that we've heard this morning, there's to me some pretty apparent data issues that would inform the deliberations. So even going back to this issue of fines and fees and what Judge Clark said initially about how she sees in her courtroom people who are in jail because they have not paid their court costs. I think that the public has no concept that that's going on, and that we could do well in having some data about how widespread it, and maybe that's one of those things that isn't known or knowable. But so I have in my mind, I'd like the data team to tell us over some relevant time period, broken down by race, if possible, how many people end up serving time for the simple reason that they have not paid a fine or fee. And how do I make that happen? Do I type that into the document that was on the SharePoint site? Do I email someone? How does that happen?
So right now somebody is taking meeting minutes, Malia, our new administrative staff lead. And so she and Mercedes will identify any questions that come out of this that are relevant to the data team. If it's a request like this one you just presented, and then they will be responsible for putting that into the spreadsheet that is on the working group tab of the SharePoint site. And then I have another meeting with the data team next Thursday in which I will present to them all of the requests and questions that came out of this round of working group meetings for them to begin working on. I actually will try and kick that out to them on Friday so that they have some time between Friday and the Thursday meeting to come with ideas and, on how to tackle a question, or if they potentially already have the answer to it, that they could come prepped on Thursday and then send back out to you guys. So that's the general process for getting them questions and then a response.
And on the other process question, I think the idea is that staff would assist the liaisons with their collaboration with the EO executive order groups. And so to the extent to which we would serve as that gap, to the extent to which someone was a liaison, but not, I mean, obviously one of the liaisons is only on one work group. So we will help close any gaps there and any questions or speakers, anything that doesn't fall squarely into a data question, we can help figure out how to make sure that the interests of each working group are represented.
Well, that's very, very helpful. With that thought in mind, Malia, one question that I would have is in 2015, 4 justices of the Supreme Court raised questions about the constitutionality of the death penalty. I would like some research on if we were to North Carolina eyes, Justice Breyer's concerns with the death penalty, ranging from public opinion to exonerations, to geographical arbitrariness, to all the range of issues, and see how impactful those concerns are, how those concerns interact with North Carolina, how the concerns about racial disparities intersect with North Carolina. That would be helpful, even for a project or a question that might be of longer term than the low-hanging fruit that we've talked about before. I think one of the values of having an intermediate, I'm sorry, Mike, is that the question of who these other outside partners, whether it's the Sentencing Commission or others that we need to intersect with, we'll be in a better, I would feel clearer about that with yet another meeting after we've sort of processed the sharing that we've had this morning. It might be easier for us to figure out who would be helpful liaison with some of these other partner organizations that are looking at some of the same questions. Mike, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, actually, that's kind of what I was gonna throw out. That maybe you mentioned about having another meeting next week, and maybe the goal between now and then would be for us as a committee to think about specific items in each of these categories that we've been charged with, and just get them out there, and also reach out to the rest of the task force and say, we are looking to identify specific items within these categories. If you have any ideas about specific items, let us know. And then we come back next week with these items, and that will help us think about, first of all, the data support that we would need to really examine some of these items, the prioritization that you've talked about, Henderson, about some of them are more straightforward than others, and also Judge Clark had talked about, and actually Justice Earls talked about at the very beginning about implementation and which things, again, from our perspective, I think we also prioritize things based on ease or likelihood of implementation as well. So there's a whole range of things that you look at when you look at those items, but it begins with actually getting a list of items, which we can do ourselves and maybe ask other people to help with. And that's very wordy. I'll hush.
I want to thank you, Mike. I want to, for a moment, see if Justice Clark or Ms. Pollard have anything that they would like to add to the discussion.
You promoted me, Michael. I kind of agree what everyone has said. I think if we could perhaps focus on things which we could have an immediate impact on, that's kind of, what I would like to do. This issue of the fines and cost is something that's kind of dear to my heart. I just sent an article to Ellen. Perhaps we can share it with everyone. Did you get it? Okay.
I did, and it's actually in our idea bank already. There's
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So it's already there. Good. The ACLU came down. I think they observed about 4 counties with regards to this issue of fines and cost, and specifically how it affects people of color, imposition of these fines, and then failure to pay, and then people end up in jail. And they did a study, gathered research. It's interesting article. So I encourage you to read it. But again, if we can focus on things that we could have some sort of direct impact on, that's what I'd like to do. And I think the fines and cost is certainly one of those areas. The other thing we mentioned, Henderson, I'm not sure if you may have said it, but Judge Thornburg, judicial discretion is another issue that I think we should probably discuss, and just disparities in sentencing, even with structured sentencing, how there's some pretty broad discretion there.
Yeah, tapping into Judge Clark's last comment and discretion, there's discretion all over the criminal justice system. One of it is with plea decisions, plea offers, sentencing recommendations that prosecutors make, consecutive sentence or concurrent sentence, and the tax that is placed on the right to trial. If you go to trial, your sentence outlook is automatically 2 or 3 times more severe than if you enter a guilty plea. I think if we look at those sentencing disparities, one of the most grievous contributions to that what might be the tax on the right to trial, and whether that's something that we want to continue with. And I haven't quite figured out how to frame up the question for research purposes, but I know that's one that anecdotally I've seen over the course of decades, and whether that's something that we could frame up to get a response from our data team is something that I will continue to struggle with and solicit help.
Thank you. Before
room for hope, I would, if you look at the draconian sentences that were imposed just 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the movement in that direction, I just say that to indicate that there has been movement, and there can be further education around how judges use their discretion. So it's happened significantly, and I think with more education, that can even be more productive. So, I think you're exactly right.
Thank you, Justice Thornburg. I've seen Ms. Pollard, I think, had something to share. Please go ahead. I've seen.
No, I hear a lot of it coming from the other speakers, so that's great. No, from my perspective, what I would really like is an opportunity to sort of take some time this week and try to maybe put in writing some of my data questions or some of my ideas about low-hanging, and either share them with the group or come back next week prepared to speak in more detail about ideas. I guess I should share the data questions right away with the staff. Yeah, I just see where we can go.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Feel free to do both if you'd like. If you want to share, feel free to do both if you'd like. If you want to share your information ahead of time and then also at the meeting.
It strikes me as you all share that there are some things, as we said, that are immediate concerns in my work in Peace and Conflict. We talk about stopping the bleeding, right? If we think about what we're doing in this form as healing, there's some things that we're going to have to do that are long term, right? There's a treatment plan, right? But there's some things we have to do right now to heal the patient, right? To get them to a place where they can do that treatment plan, right? And so, what are I would ask, as you all move into that exchange over the next week or so, you thinking about what types of things need to be added or considered as priority, or what are the things that need to be done today? Because there's people who are getting pulled over today. There are people who are going to go before magistrates today that are being impacted by the way that things are now, and that the recommendations that we can make, honestly, now, like today, you can say something right now that we take to the task force, like Jasmine and them are ready to send that to somebody, put it on the list. So, there are some things that we could do, and so I just charge the group with that to as you move to those to those things, is what are the things that for you that from your expertise, from your as Justice Clark said, from seeing this every day, the things that if you could change it tomorrow, what would it be, and how would that get done? And as you said, Henderson, some of the stuff we don't need a study group because we already know. So how can we move to those, figuring out what those things are that we already know that need to go ahead and be put on a list, and the things that we need to be mulling over a little bit more so we can think about a treatment plan for the state. What are we going to need in the long term? Do we need to become vegan, right? Or do we need to, how are we gonna make sure that those things get handled? So we have about 10 more minutes left, and some of the things that in that last section, we talk about the next steps, and we're going to turn over to Henderson. But we've talked about some of the next step things that we need to do. So I think we can use some of the time in this last 10 minutes we have to think about what those like stopgap measures are, so that we can be prioritized for the next meeting next Monday.
Michael, I was going to raise a process question. You know, we've gone about 75 minutes. And like you say, we've got another 10 minutes. And, you know, one question is whether a meeting at 8 o'clock, a 90-minute meeting versus a 75-minute meeting is what would be most comfortable and productive for the group. I've never felt sorry for judges before. You know, they've got a gavel in their hand and the clock starts when they rap that gavel. But I do know that many courts start at 9 o'clock or 9:30, and it might make a difference, particularly to our members of the judiciary, whether we end at 9:15 or 9:30. And so I would raise that question to our judicial members. Also, I trip up over labels. It's hard for me to call Josh Stein Attorney General Stein. It's hard for me to think of him as a general and call him General Stein. And I wonder if we shouldn't just sort of accept certain, some protocols about how we address folks. It's hard for me to call a Judge Allen in a formal setting like this. So I'm comfortable with Judge Thornburg, Judge Clark, Justice Clark, but it might be that first name basis is the easiest for everybody. And we all won't trip over those formalities in the working group. And I certainly invite folks to call me by my first name. That's not much of an accommodation. I've got 2 last names, but yeah, I think we ought to talk about that. But I think the most important question for me is, should this be a 75-minute meeting, particularly if we're gonna have it on almost like a weekly basis versus a 90-minute meeting? I think we've discussed sufficiently the to-do or next steps efforts. I think we have an idea about how we want to communicate our priority issues to the rest of the group, and so that next Tuesday's meeting would be most productive. So I'd like a response just on the timing piece. Do we keep the 90-minute schedule if folks are comfortable with that, or should we move to a 75-minute schedule?
I'm not a judge, but I vote for 75 minutes. I think we can come back, especially if we come back with a more targeted agenda. We can get a lot done in 75 minutes, and that might make it a little bit easier for everybody involved.
I agree about 75 minutes. I was able to talk to my assistant or to the assistant district attorney assigned in criminal court. So they are starting best they can without me. And some days I'll be able to do that. So I think I vote for 75, and feel free to call me Brooke.
And Mary.
Well, very good. I think we've established some important things just in terms of process. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, 8 o'clock, and we'll go from 8 to 9:15. And we're each individually charged with communicating in some form or fashion. Email, or those more ambitious might actually go into the structure that has been set up to identify priority items, other folks who need to be invited into the conversation, suggestions for liaisoning with those other groups, and really just the ideas that you want to put in the idea bank. Additional resources that you want to put in the idea bank. And I will look to forward my thoughts to the working group and to the staff. So those are sort of teed up for Tuesday's meetings. Any general comments, closing thoughts before we call it a wrap?
Henderson, I just wanted to add the other thing that I heard the working group say is that low-hanging fruit might be something that people were thinking about bringing to the next meeting. As they bring their ideas, they perhaps have some kind of internal categorization about what could be front-loaded.
Yes. Good. Well, thank you all. I think this has been very, very productive, and I look forward to having a productive week between now and Tuesday and seeing some of the follow-up. Have a great day, all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.